Hi there, I'm Tim Ties and welcome to CSI Shop Talk. Today we're going to talk about weld head adapter cables and weld head extensions. Before we do that, I do want to cover the fact that there are a couple of models of weld heads that do not require any kind of adapter cables to connect them directly to the AMI 207 or 217. Primarily that's the 9500 weld head and the 9250 weld head. Those are not liquid cooled weld heads, and as a result you can connect the power cables directly to the power supply by connecting the cam locks directly to the cam lock ports on the power supply. At this point, this power supply is ready to run this weld head once I connected the motor cable and the purge. But for the purposes of today's discussion, we're going to primarily focus on the liquid cooled weld heads. So I'm going to grab a 1500 and a 1-foot adapter cable and walk you through that process. I have my 1500 liquid cooled AMI weld head. I have a CSI chiller, and on top of the CSI chiller is an AMI 207. The liquid cooled weld heads require some form of adapter cable in order to connect them to the power supply. In my hands, I have a 1-foot cheater cable. This has power lines and water lines, and to connect your liquid cooled weld head to the power supply, you need to first start out by connecting the cam locks to the cam lock ports on the power supply. Then you connect the chiller connectors to the chiller ports on the cooling unit. And next you have to connect the water power fittings on the adapter cable to the water power fittings on the weld head. So these brass connectors connect like that, and it's important that you always seat these protective boots over that connection. Now you would be ready to weld. If you do not seat these connections, these boots over these connections, and these connections are allowed to touch, you'll create an arc. If you have them on metal, you'll create an arc. If you happen to run your purge spring through them, you'll create an arc. So it's critical that you actually cover these connections to keep these connections from touching themselves or any other metal. This is a 15-foot adapter. It's just a longer version of the 1-foot adapter. If you need a little more distance, but you don't need 50 foot, you could use this. So it connects similarly to the 1-foot adapter. You have your cam lock connectors. They connect into the cam lock ports on the power supply. Give those a twist. Then again, you have your chiller connections. Those go onto your cooling unit. Now the 15-foot adapter also includes a motor cable and a purge connector. You would of course connect those to the power supply and connect that to the purge port. Once again, you need to connect your liquid cooled weld head water power connectors to the brass connectors, in this case on the 15-foot adapter. The process is the same as with the 1-foot adapter. You connect the brass fittings, you seat the boots snugly over them. They fit together like that. That is now safe to weld. That will not cross arc with this connector or any other metal that might get in between them. Again, it's important that you seat both boots so that they're both protected from each other. If you need more distance between your weld head and your power supply, CSI offers 50-foot dry extensions and 50-foot wet extensions. This is a 50-foot wet cable extension. It's very similar to the 50-foot dry with the addition of water lines. Now we're going to go through connecting this to the power supply and the weld head. So, as with both the 1-foot adapter and the 50-foot dry, we have the cam lock connections and we have the coolant lines now. Again, since we're going to be 50 feet away from the power supply, we have to have a separate motor cable and a separate purge line. This end is your power supply end, and again, we connect these cam locks directly to the cam lock ports on the power supply. Okay. Again, you would need to attach the motor cable and the purge to the ports on the power supply. You have coolant lines, so if you're going to be running coolant, you're going to want to connect these coolant connectors to the coolant ports on the cooling unit. Once you've done that, you're going to again need your 1-foot adapter. You'll notice that the weld head end of the 50-foot cable has separate water and power connectors. So again, we're going to attach the cam locks, give those a quarter turn, connect those. Now you need to connect your water connections, your coolant connections to your coolant lines. Now you're ready to run coolant through the weld head and the 50-foot cable. But you again have to connect your brass water power connectors to the weld head, as well as in this case, the motor cable and the purge line that are still coming from the 50-foot extension. So once again, we grab the end of the weld head cable assembly and we connect the brass connectors. And then you would complete the connection by, again, connecting the purge and the motor cable to the purge and the motor cable from the 50-foot extension.